Everyone has a story. Stay tuned to learn how you can tell your story to the world. Here is Earl Littman.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to reintroduce Gabrielle Baumeyer. Well, welcome, Gab.
Thank you, Earl. Thank you.
It's our pleasure to have you here this morning. I'm going to ask you some very simple questions, if you don't mind. Where were you born?
In Austin, Texas.
My goodness. And Mom and Dad, what did they do?
Well, my mom owned a restaurant for many years. We are Hispanic, and we have multiple Mexican food restaurants in our family. So as far back as I can remember, she had a restaurant right there on the University of Texas drag, and I ate there frequently.
I would imagine so, but not only you. It was on the drag near 6th Street?
It was on 29th and Guadalupe.
Oh,
so
okay.
it was right there on the University of Texas drag.
Right on the campus, practically. So you used to see a lot of young people coming into the restaurant,
Absolutely.
I'm sure. And they came in looking thin and left very heavy.
That's right.
Well, that's great. You mentioned that your family was always in the restaurant business?
Mm-hmm. Like I said, from as far back as I can remember, we've always had restaurants. But my great-grandfather, Tony Villasana, he actually started a tortilla factory here in Houston.
Really?
And the restaurant business kind of spawned out of that.
And the restaurants were primarily in the Austin area, or where?
Yes.
Okay. Were they all Mexican restaurants or tortilla restaurants especially?
Well, they definitely had the tortillas as one of the main components on the menu. But I also have a second cousin who had a Italian food restaurant in Austin as well, so they ventured out.
Okay. Now, did they all operate under the same name, or?
No, well, my immediate family, the Vasquez family, we have a chain of restaurants that are called Austin's Tamale House.
Oh, okay.
And so my cousin who had the Italian food restaurant, his restaurant was named Vinny's, and he also had the Uptown Enchilada Bar, so they ventured out from the name, but all had a Mexican flair.
Terrific. I assume that you had a lot of brothers and sisters?
No, only child.
That didn't sound like the family that I was expecting you to describe, with all of these people being in the restaurant.
I did have lots of cousins, and do have lots of cousins,
Right.
and second cousins, and our family reunions were always quite large.
Most of the folks still in Austin?
They are.
And anybody in Houston other than yourself?
No, I do have some second cousins and aunts and uncles that are here in Houston as well, but the majority of my immediate family, they're in Austin.
Any of the people in Houston in the restaurant business?
I have a cousin, her name is Carmen, and every Christmas she makes the tamales that you could just die for. So it's still in the blood. It's still in there.
Well, that's a great DNA to have. That's terrific. And then how long did you stay before you, in Austin, did you go to school in the elementary school?
I did. I went to Montessori school.
How old were you when you started?
I was 2 years old.
2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And you started, were you speaking both English and Spanish then?
I was. Our nannies were typically of Hispanic descent, and so my first language was, I teeter back and forth. It could have been English. It most likely was Spanish.
Okay. And in Montessori school, how long did you stay there?
Until I believe it was 12 years old.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So you, from 2 to 12, a good 10 years?
Yes.
Usually with the same kids?
No, as you go from I guess every 3 years or so, the ages of the kids in the class do change. But one thing typical to Montessori school is you do have different age children in the same class.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And all studying the same subject at the same time?
No, Montessori, they have a different form of teaching where they're not structured lessons. And so given you have different ages of kids in different classes, you could have some kids who are learning about math, and some kids who are learning about geography, and they're all kind of doing it at different times throughout the day.
That sounds like a wonderful foundation for education. Do you think that Montessori experience really helped quite a bit?
I do, because it really fostered in me my exploration into what was of interest to me.
Which was what at that time?
Mathematics.
Mathematics.
I like to do any of the lessons that were math involved.
Is
I just
that
gravitated to that. Mm-hmm.
Anybody in your family like that, or was it just you?
No, well, I have some cousins who have studied engineering and lean towards the math and science, but in my immediate family, it was really of my interest.
Gabrielle, at 12 now, you are finished with Montefiore. you went to regular public school?
No, I went to St. Andrews. It's an Episcopal school, private school for
Okay.
junior high.
And any particular reason that you picked St. Andrews? I know the school, and I know its reputation for high education. Is that one of the reasons that you selected St. Andrews?
No, quite frankly, Montessori school, I couldn't stay there past the age of 12, and so I had to find another school. So there was one reason I switched. The second reason was one of my classmates was going to St. Andrews, and it just seemed like a logical choice, and so I just went there.
Good for you. Well, it was a good choice. I know that there are two schools of almost equivalency in Austin with that sort of educational background. Did you do any sports or anything else at that time?
I did. I did volleyball at St. Andrews.
What position did you play? You don't seem tall enough to be a volleyball player.
I was a setter, and I was pretty good at serving as well, but mainly I was a setter.
Did you serve underhand or overhand like some of the boys did?
Overhand.
Overhand.
Which might sound surprising given my height, but I was
that
good
is
overhand.
surprising. That's why I asked the question, because it's usually the height of those forwards at soccer that are tall, and when they jump up and hit that ball, it's a line drive going across the net, and you were capable of doing that.
I was.
Good for you.
Surprisingly so, I was.
Well, I'm sure that you must have done very well. Did the team do well?
We did. We did do well.
And that is a private high school league that you competed in?
No, that was just junior high, just at St. Andrews. St. Andrews didn't go past the 8th grade.
Oh, okay. And then 8th grade, where did you go after that?
I went to public school, switched over to Austin High.
Okay, and how big a school was that? Was it totally different than everything else that you had experienced?
It was a bit of a culture shock, for sure. I think our graduating class had something like 400 people in it, so it was definitely a different environment for me.
And the kids were different than you, or pretty much alike? You had a very unique background, not only from your family heritage, but getting into a public school that has everybody coming in. How did you feel?
Oh, I felt like a little fish in a big pond.
I would imagine.
And, I'm always very concerned with doing well. I really want to excel at whatever I do, and so I'm always, a bit worried of, how's this going to go and how am I going to adjust. And so moving into high school, there was, true to myself, I was the same way. And so I was a little intimidated by the bigger classes and, having to figure out what floor in the high school to go to and where my classes were and whatnot. But, I tried to make friends as quickly as possible and make friends with the teachers, to tell you the truth, because I knew that they could help guide me in the right direction. That was my strategy.
And what were the classes mostly? Again, math that you excelled in?
Yes, I went pretty quickly into, the advanced algebra classes and advanced geometry classes and whatnot, just because I knew I could. First of all, it just interests me, and I knew that I would be comfortable there, so I definitely still gravitated to that.
Very unusual, not only for the fact that you're a young girl at the time, but if you were anything like me, the teachers call my mother up and say, we know he's trying hard, he's never going to get through elementary math, but we'll pass him only because he's a good boy, period. So good for you. I'm impressed, to say the least, that you could do so well in those classes. And were you playing any athletics at that time?
No, I wasn't. I failed to mention that back in junior high I played tennis, so I was on the tennis team back then, but I didn't go out for the team or anything for high school. Frankly, I was just quite intimidated by the level of athletes that were out there. They were quite impressive, and I didn't think I had it quite in me, and so I basically in high school studied.
And how were your grades?
Oh, they were fine. They were fine. A's and B's, and I just worked really hard because I knew that once high school came to an end, and I knew it was only going to be a quick four short years, I had to get into college, and so I was really focused on that quite most of the time.
Well, good for you. And after graduation, what did you decide to do then?
I went to, like I mentioned, went to UT, and so got into the University of Texas, knowing that I would.
Did you get a scholarship to get in?
No, that was back in the time I didn't know what scholarships were, and I didn't have any, kind of idea on how that whole system worked, and so we were fortunate enough to be able to, pay my way through college, and that was back when, I remember one semester my tuition for that year was only $900. It was ridiculously low.
Remarkable. So we graduate, and we're now at the University of Texas. We're in our freshman year. And what did you decide to study?
Well, given my love for math and aptitude for math, I decided to go into engineering. Someone had mentioned to me, if you have an engineering degree, you'll probably have a job by the end of college. So leaving high school in 91, going into the University of Texas, went into the civil engineering department and specifically studied structural engineering. It was an architectural engineering focus.
Okay. Did you take engineering when you graduated?
No, I actually, as my classes got harder and harder throughout the 4.5 years there at University of Texas, it just got more and more difficult because, once you get up into the advanced classes, you really have to be good at math and really have an aptitude for it. And so I realized in my junior year this probably wasn't something that I was going to do full term. And
that's a surprise to me, really.
But I knew I wanted the degree. There was no question whether or not I would finish my degree, and I did. But I knew I would do something other than the actual engineering work that I was trained to do in college, and so I went into construction management.
Construction management doing what?
Out on a construction site. So I was hired in my senior year. There was recruitment, of course, at the Career Center on campus, and I was interviewed by Gilbane Building Company. At the time, they were the 10th largest construction management firm in the country, and so they were in Houston, and they hired me and moved me to Houston, and been here 20 years.
Do you remember who was in charge of Gilbane at the time?
Well, I remember the gentleman who came to interview me on campus, Marshall Lightman. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Oh, okay. And that was your first job, and you went out on construction sites supervising, or what were you actually doing?
Yes, I was part of the supervision team, and so we were what was called the owner's representative. And so the owners, they want to build a building, right? And so they need to hire a firm to actually do that management for them. So we were the coordinators between the architects and the engineers and the subcontractors, really acting on the owner's behalf. And the first big project where I was placed was the Moody Gardens facility down in Galveston. And so it was a $500 million project, and so they put me out on site with my team, and I started to learn the business.
And what was the site when you first found it? Was it just bare ground?
It was, they were just doing the site work and starting to excavate and starting to do the putting the trailers on the campus there, so we could actually have a place to work and to meet. And so it started out as, there wasn't much there. There were other buildings as part of Moody Gardens, because Moody Gardens was built, many, many years ago. We were doing phase 4 at the time.
And your specific job, did you have an assignment to do, like watch where the streets go, or was it just general observations?
Now, I was called, at the time, it was called a project engineer. And so I worked under the project manager, so the gentleman who was in charge of the whole project. And I was really kind of one of his right-hand people. And so we would help with the cost reporting and tracking of the change orders. That building or that project was called design build. And so it was literally being designed as it was being built. And so what comes inherent to a project of that sort is that there are change orders. So there's always something that changes, and so we were helping track the changes.
How long did you do that?
I was with them probably about 3 or 4 years.
On that same project?
Mm-hmm.
And living in Houston and commuting down, is that it?
No, by that time I'd already lived in Galveston. I decided to make the move.
Oh, okay. And still single at that time?
Yes.
And were you having a lot of fun at that time, or working too hard?
No, I was working a lot. It was, 12, 14 hours a day. And again, inherent to a design build project like that, there are a lot of hours that you put in, because you always feel like you're behind schedule and running over budget. And so there's always a tendency to just work longer hours to make sure things are going well.
And what did you do at the end of the 4 years? What was the site of the construction? Was it finished or halfway?
By that time, we built a pyramid-shaped building. It was called the NASA Exhibit Museum. And so that was roughly complete, or just about complete, and they were already starting construction on the hotel that's down there now.
Oh, okay.
And the aquarium was another part of that phase 4 project.
And from what you are assuming to me is that you left there to take another job, or?
No, well, they moved me on to another project, and so then they moved me up north. So I went out to at the time it was called the North Harris Community College, and so there was a facility they were building out there for the Applied Technology building, and so they put me on site as there as well.
And this is still with Gilbane.
Mm-hmm.
And how long did you stay on that job?
Oh, I was probably there for another couple, 3 years or something of that sort. I don't remember. It's a little foggy now, but I was there for a while as well. And by that time, I had already gravitated towards learning how to use a software product that was given to us. This was back when software was kind of new to the construction industry, so that part of my going to that job was helping them use that software.
So this was your first exposure to software, really, to any great extent?
Yeah, it was. And what was funny about, getting put out on a new project as a, new graduate and, not really knowing what to expect. I just came out of college. What occurred to me was that construction project management was a lot of paper pushing. There was a lot of paper everywhere, and there was tracking of things, and you'd have a log, and then you'd have another log to track the logs, and so by that time, when they'd given me a software product to help me really facilitate how things were tracked and monitored and how to follow up on things, I just fell in love with it. It was streamlined my work so much.
Had you learned any of that while you were in college?
No. In college, I remember my sophomore year, I had to go up to the third floor and go to the computer lab, and I was so intimidated to even get off of the elevator at that time to go where all the smart people were in the computer lab. I didn't even know how to turn on a computer, and so that was pretty intimidating as well.
This is a brand new experience where you have hands-on and you're responsible for shifting off from a paper authority now to a computer.
Well, there was that part, but the other surprising part to it was when my bosses and managers found out that I actually liked doing software and liked learning how the process worked. I became the authority on it. And so I was called upon to go and teach other project sites how to utilize the software and how to have it help them do their job better. So I actually became the team leader for making sure people use the product.
Remarkable progress. I'm really proud of you. So you went from construction site to construction site, and doing that for the people that were there, trying to eliminate their paper shuffling into software and the using of the computer. How long did you do that now?
Well, given I really enjoyed that software product and I enjoyed teaching people how to use it, at one point I figured out that I actually enjoyed that better or more than the actual construction work.
That's interesting.
So one day I called the software company, who at that time they were based in California. I called them and asked them for a job, and they gave it to me.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And did you have to move to California at that time?
I did not. I called them up one day, and I even remember now who answered the phone. Gene Alhady answered the phone, and I said, look, I love your product. I've been using it for this many years. I'm one of your largest clients, because at that time Gilbane was, one of the big clients that they had on board, and said I would love to work with you and somehow help you help others in using this product. And so he transferred me over to the training department. I talked to Ken Harrison, and about 2 weeks later, Ken came down to the airport. He met me in Houston. He flew in from California. I remember meeting him at gate C14. This was back before you had to have an actual boarding pass to get through security. I met him at the gate. We talked a bit, and about a week later he offered me a job, and he said I would get to stay in Houston. I would just be a remote employee for them and travel all around the United States helping them train others.
Nobody else in Houston for Meridian?
No, not at that time.
Good for you. They must have had lots of confidence in talking to you and seeing what you have done. So you traveled all over?
Yes.
Primarily with Meridian, or did you go to Gilbane jobs or others?
Well, ironically, given that I was from Gilbane, I became the head trainer at Meridian Systems. I became the head trainer on the Gilbane account. And so at that point, I finally got to go visit other Gilbane regional offices in the United States to support them in learning the product and implementing it correctly in their company.
Most unusual. I've never heard anybody have a career path like that, but it is based upon capability and ability and being able to produce. But it is unusual when you think about it.
Well, and another part of that, because you hit the nail on the head, it was those couple of things, but what it also was I just had an interest in it, and going back and referencing how Montessori was structured and how I learned in that environment, we really followed what was of interest to us. And so that's what I've been doing across my career path is I've learned something, and then I find it interesting, and then I follow it. And thank goodness, and I'm very lucky to have been able to follow something that provides me a paycheck as well.
Right. How long did you stay with Meridian?
Oh, I probably stayed with them at that point. It was maybe another 3 or 4 years that I stayed with them. And there was one year I remember, Earl, I was sitting on an airplane and I counted how many cities I had visited, and I went to 32 different cities for them in 1 year.
In 1 year?
In 1 year, visiting different construction sites and different companies that were using our product.
You must have gained a lot of reward points from the airplanes.
Yes. I used to say one of my hobbies was gaining airline points.
Well, now, are you still single at that time?
Yes. Okay.
So now we have used up another 4 years or so with Meridian, and what do you decide to do now?
Well, then I wanted to, I found something else that was of interest to me, and that was management consulting. And so just really going into companies and training them on different leadership styles and change management within the culture of companies. And so
you just automatically decided that you wanted to do that, or did somebody interest you in doing that or joining them? How did that work?
Well, if we backtrack a little bit, even before I left Gilbane to go to Meridian, I did a class called the Landmark Forum, and it's all about leadership development and really exploring who you are, what you're capable of, and where your limits are. And so when I did that class, that was really the launching point for me to make that phone call to Meridian. And that's when I started to get really interested in, what makes people tick and what is the thing that drives people to really be the best they can be. And so when I started to kind of uncover and discover what it was to go into companies and really manage cultural change and organizational development, then I was really interested in being in that industry as well. And so I made the jump and went into management consulting.
With a company or?
Yes, a Houston-based company, a small firm called King Chapman and Broussard. And so we did a lot of work with companies in the energy field and even in the paper products business. So something about those types of companies is they're very process-oriented, manufacturing-oriented. And so the ability to go in and really leverage the intelligence of their people and to have their people really find ways to cut costs and drive costs down, that was something that was inherent to leadership development, having people really think outside the box and figure out ways to make the company more profitable.
Now, is this in a person-to-person or department, or is it just taking a whole company into a conference area and just lecturing them?
No, the key was bringing people from different departments together and having interdepartment teams to think and strategize together on how they can increase profitability in their company, and really having them inside conversations they haven't been in before, and have them look and explore and determine what are the things that their people can bring to the table and they can start to implement now that will help them be more efficient in the long term. And so it's really fostering them to have conversations they hadn't had before and look from a place they hadn't looked before, and they come up with these amazing ideas. When you really just sit down and ask people, what do you think we should do and what ideas have you had that we haven't heard before, then they'll start to express themselves and give you ideas that are worth implementing.
Gabrielle, what's running through my mind? Little girl, mom running a tortilla restaurant in Austin, Texas, now teaching people how to make their leadership and throughout their company integrated from person to person to make the company more profitable and more productive. It's just unbelievable when I think about it. How old do you think you were at that time?
Let's see. I was probably 26, 27. Again, it kind of all becomes a blur. I was less. I don't think I was 30 years old by that time.
Well, it is amazing to me. You usually think, oh, little girl from a restaurant, local area, now doing this in 30 countries, cities, and now all over it with individual companies, and being the Well, the rainmaker for new business development
Right.
and getting leadership within their core group, building a team that will be much more productive as a result of what you are, getting them to bring collectively together and form new ideas to get over those hurdles. It's relatively remarkable when you think about whether you were 25 or 28. I don't know of too many people that have accomplished that, so I just can only say my congratulations. How long did you do that?
Oh, I did that for another few years, and then had an opportunity to go to be a contractor with the city of Houston. And
Really?
yes, it's kind of funny how everything kind of turns on its head, but I had an opportunity, like I said, to go work with the city of Houston. They were implementing a software, and given I had that type of background, it looked like a perfect fit. And it's a curious story how I ended up there. I met my now husband Bill, and he and I went on a soccer date, and I met his father, who was at an engineering company, who also had an engineering degree and was a professional engineer, and he introduced me to this opportunity with the city of Houston. And so that first date became a job interview, and eventually ended up being a contractor with the city of Houston.
We're going to have to take a break, but I can't wait to hear how this went also. Well, we're back again. My guest this morning is Gabrielle Baumeyer, who was just telling us that she took a job with the city of Houston, helping them with their software program, and at that same time, or just not necessarily simultaneously, but within that time frame, she met her husband, and I was wondering how they ever met.
Oh, we met at Landmark when I was doing the leadership development classes. Probably I'd met him maybe 3 or 4 years prior to that, and we became good friends, and then one thing led to another, and we went on a date.
That was a job that was well worthwhile.
Yes.
So meeting him, and then about 2-3 years later, you went on that first date,
Yes.
and that was when the light got struck.
I suppose you could call it that, yes.
Well, good for you. Okay, so now what is this job specifically? What are you going to do for the city?
So I was hired actually by an engineering firm called Atzer, and they had the contract with the city, so I was a contractor for the City of Houston Public Works and Engineering Division. And our job was to build and implement a software product that would help the different departments talk to each other. So the design department needed to talk to the construction department, needed to talk to the planning department, and so our product was to help them put all their information into one system to make communication between those departments more efficient.
And you were by yourself at that time, representing your firm?
Yes. Well, I was stationed down there. Of course, I had a team of people who were with me, had developers, and but I was the project manager on that project, and also the head trainer and documentation specialist. And so we probably trained about 400 employees within Public Works on how to use this product.
So all the background that you've had was coming to
Yes.
fruition, that you took the training along with the engineering background and construction background and were able to put it together for the city's public works and engineering department.
Yes.
That's pretty wonderful and miraculous in a way that that path has led you there. So how long did you stay with the city?
Gosh, that was probably another 3 or 4 years or so. And then the project, just like any project, it comes to an end. And, in this type of industry, in construction and software industry, it's project-based. And so everything happens about 2, 3, 4 years at a time, and then you kind of have to move on depending on what's coming down the pipe in terms of projects. And so the project was coming to an end, and I could see the writing on the wall, and I said, well, I guess I need to find something else. And luckily, Meridian Systems, I was still in communication with them, and I knew they had a new product coming out, and so I went with them for a second run.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Doing the same thing?
Similar. I did some sales for them at first on their new product line, and then eventually I gravitated back into the training department because I just really have a love for training people, for showing them how to find their best selves and how to make their jobs more efficient. So I ended up back in the training department.
Perfect. How long again?
Now, this stint was probably about 8 or 9 years
Really?
with them. Mm-hmm.
My goodness, were you now the chief executive?
No, by any stretch of the imagination. No, I always stayed, in close contact with the users because being able to work with people one-on-one or even in a classroom setting and facilitate conversations for them and to have them see what's going to make them more efficient. And in that time, of course, it was our product that was intended to be that tool for
Gabrielle,
them.
what was your husband doing at that time?
He was in the mutual fund business, so he worked for Bridgeway Capital Management based in Houston.
Out of Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And now what happens? You finish with your second stint around with Meridian, and what do you guys decide to do?
Well, while I was with Meridian and Bill was still with Bridgeway, we, in our spare time, we were doing some charitable work. He specifically was on the board of a couple of organizations. So one was a 501c3 nonprofit called Cherish Our Children International, and then also he was on the board of Bridgeway Foundation, because something that Bridgeway, his company, does is they give away 50% of their profits every year to charity.
Remarkable company.
Yes.
I ran into them when I was chairman of the the Anti-Defamation League, and they are a remarkable company. Young management at that time, at least, and very socially conscious, and they do give away that money, and they get involved with those charities as well.
Very much so. Yes.
I might have run into your husband accidentally at that time.
Perhaps. Bill Baumeyer.
Yeah.
Not a lot of Bill Baumeyers in the city.
I don't imagine. Okay, so now you and Bill decide to go into your own business. Is that what happened?
We did. If you fast forward a little bit, yes, that was the part of the next story. But in 2007 is when we really started to get involved with Cherish Our Children International, and someone invited us to do a triathlon and to do it in honor of children and raise money, and I just fell in love with it. And one of the turning points for me, Earl, was when I met John Montgomery, the founder of Bridgeway, and when I found out that they give away that much money, something sparked in me, and I said, I'd really love to do something like that, but didn't have a widget. I didn't have a product that I could make money at and then in turn give a lot of money away. And so I kind of, 8 years prior, started to think about, what can I really do that can make that significant of a difference. And so Bill and I, again, we started to fundraise for Cherish Our Children. We were very successful at it year after year.
How many children did you have by that time?
Well, personally, we didn't have any children, but Cherish Our Children served, children not only in the Houston area but abroad as well, making a difference with children who are in vulnerable situations, specifically here in Houston, helping the kids of No More Victims whose parents are incarcerated. COSI, which is Cherish Our Children, they helped to break that cycle. And so we were raising money for that organization and got good at it, and eventually started to help other organizations as well.
Well, I got to say this, and I usually interrupt my guests at this point when I think that they discovered their rainbow to climb across and find their pot of gold. And I describe that it isn't a pot of gold necessarily of money, but it's a pot of gold of accomplishment and doing something, particularly giving back to society. Making money at the same time is wonderful. Nobody is complaining about that. But just like Bridgeway made money, but they shared their profits. You went into something that you could enjoy, but also gave back to society in a big way. So what did you actually form a new company?
We did. So, again, that was 2007 that we started. So by 2009, 2010, Bill and I were starting to really have serious discussions about how can we make this model work for other nonprofits, because we would have people asking us, you've helped one charity, can you help us as well? And so Bill, one day, I remember it vividly, we were in the bedroom, and he's putting on his socks and shoes, and he says, we just need to build our own platform that empowers other nonprofits to do the same as what we're doing, and because if we can help one, we can help hundreds. And that's when Reason2Race was really born, was back in 2009-ish, and then in 2011 we formed the company. And we still weren't ready to just leave our jobs and make this a full-time go at it. And so I went part-time with my job, and then he actually got laid off, and so it was kind of the writing was on the wall, like, look, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this now. And so for a year he worked full-time with Reason2Race, and then we reevaluated and said, all right, it's time for me to make the jump too.
Okay, now I think what we need to do is slow down and explain what is it that we do.
Sure. So Reason2Race supports nonprofits with online fundraising. And so there's a way for them to reach out to their supporters and invite them to do some type of athletic event in their honor and raise funds for them. So they the supporters each set up online fundraising pages and garner donations on behalf of their favorite charity.
Do you write the software that they use?
Now, I didn't write the software, but I did write the specs for it. We have a development side to us that
Okay.
they do the development on the software.
Okay. And how do you find these nonprofit charities? Do they come to you primarily?
Yeah, there are different ways because another part of our business is we work with companies on making their charitable contribution. And so a lot of times when we're working with a company and they say, hey, we really love this charity here, so sometimes that's how the charities find us. We also work with event directors, so gentlemen and women who do 5Ks and marathons. So sometimes, they'll have an event, and so we'll find the charities through those events as well. And then a lot of it's just word of mouth.
And the name of your company is?
Reason2Race.
And that makes a lot of sense. It is a reason to race, meaning that when you not only have the enjoyment of participating in the event, you also are contributing to society by raising money, and that money comes through friends, families, and others, or corporations that are helping to sponsor that event. And it is a tremendous way to get companies and individuals as well to do teamwork like you have been doing, leadership teamwork, and raise money at the same time while people are enjoying themselves.
We work with any 501c3 organizations, so it has to be based in the United States. And the key thing about our model is that it's available for use 365 days a year for any event. So it doesn't have to be a marathon. It can be a 5K. It could be a bowling event. It could be a yoga competition. It can be whatever you want. And so what we've been able to do is to really foster this idea called have people do something great for themselves while a nonprofit is motivating them to do so.
Well, I know we're running out of time. I just want to repeat something that Gabrielle shared to me, that they do approximately 1,200 events and raise over $1.5 million for these local and international causes. International causes are when these charities also extend their help to other nations wherever they may be. So what you have been doing, Gabrielle, has just been a remarkable thing, along with your husband Bill, and I hope it continues to grow and becomes even more profitable, not only for you, because you deserve it for the work that you're doing, but also for the very many charities that you currently represent and future ones that will come on board. I wish you to have happiness and success today and every day.